Hi there, and welcome to the second episode of my trip down memory lane to the Pacific Crest Trail and my Thru-hike exactly 10 years ago. If you were there for the first episode, then you know that in the first week I hiked from the southern terminus point at the Mexican border to Julian, and that we spent a nice day there in Julian, had delicious meal, bought groceries, and then hiked out again in the evening and were able to enjoy some very nice trail magic at Scissors Crossing. And that's where we start again. The next thing that we were facing was a very steep climb, a very long climb, and I think it was the tallest, the largest climb so far that we had to face. And well, staying at the Scissors Crossing trail magic, it was really not like as if the thru-hikers were somehow thrilled to get going. And because it was still brutally hot and somehow nobody wanted to run up this climb in the afternoon or evening heat. And so we all just hung out a bit at the trail magic, and when the sun slowly began to tilt towards the horizon, we dipped our bandanas into buckets of ice water and then wrapped it around our heads, and that was really nice for the first few hundred meters. Very pleasant to have a cold, wet cloth on our foreheads, even though it quickly turned back into, such a warm rag. But it was definitely a little motivational kick, so, we are going to do this now. Let's go, let's climb. And, And right here in the pictures we can see a bit of the climb, and here on the video above I'm already relatively high up. And by then it was getting quite pleasant for hiking, because the sun was really starting to set, and I remember stumbling across a first aid kit and then collecting it and giving it back to the owners later. Sometimes you remember funny little details, but I remember exactly what it was like back then. And yes, when the sun really slowly went away and the moon rose, I experienced something that I had never seen in this form before. The moonlight shone on me, and I then cast a moon shadow which was so clearly outlined as if it were somehow drawn. And that was totally crazy. I don't know if the moonlight had a different angle of incidence or why it was so strong. Stronger than in Europe. But it was also like, it was so bright we didn't need any lights at all to hike there at night. So no flashlights, no headlamps. And you could just walk there, and that was totally fascinating and also very beautiful. That you had this freedom at night in an environment where there was no artificial light, just this natural light of the moon. Yes, it was just totally magical, and I really enjoyed it. And then we walked a good distance, I think several more hours, so a bit far into the night, and then at some point we just set up our tents at a spot where other people were already camping, and we set up there quite quietly, and then just went to bed after a very fulfilling day. And the next day, oh wonder, it was brutally hot again in the morning. And I am actually someone who likes to sleep in, or rather I like to lie around in the bed for a bit before I get up, but that wasn't possible at all. Because you have to imagine it like this: you're lying in a tent and it's actually a plastic dome, and it heats up so incredibly. So it becomes a real sauna in there, and well, you can't stand it for long. So, which is why we were usually on the road at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in these hot regions. So but we really enjoyed it. Not the heat, but hiking in this incredible scenery. I already told you in the first episode how much I like the desert. And despite all the struggles with the heat and the lack of water, it was really, really nice. And you can see now there are already fewer plants. It was really very dry terrain with lots of cacti and somehow succulents or something like that. But there weren't that many trees anymore and things like that. And I really like it when plants are not so strongly represented. So I do most of my hiking in the Norwegian mountains, for example, and I really like that too, that there's the absence of vegetation. I like those landscapes that seem to be hostile at first glance. And, I like plants, of course, but I just really like this roughness, this raw, original charm of such landscapes. And that's what I had here too. Nevertheless, I was very happy about every plant that provided a bit of shade, because that was absolutely essential for a siesta. And because shade provides a little more bearable temperatures where you can stand it to some extent in the midday heat. This video shows the way to the third gate water cache, which is the only water cache in the desert that you can actually rely on. Water caches are man-made water reservoirs, usually in a form of canisters, but sometimes in a form of tanks or something. And that's also a form of trail magic, so there are nice people who simply cart or carry water in the desert. And these are usually small collections of canisters, maybe 40 liters total or something. And sometimes you know that there are water caches ahead, but even if you know, you cannot rely on them really carrying any water. It's just a nice add-on to the water you're already carrying, because you always plan at the limit. I don't think many hikers have 2 liters of water left at the end of a planned stage. Usually you have maybe 200 milliliters left or something like that. And as a rule, you always try to take enough with you to get by and maybe have a little bit in reserve in case something takes longer or whatever, but not so much that you have to carry yourself a whole load of water extra. And a water cache is just a nice surprise, so you can have a drink that you hadn't planned on, because at least I could always drink in this heat. And but the third gate water cache is a water cache that you can actually rely on and that everyone plans for, because it's in the middle of a very long stretch without water, and that would simply mean that you would have to carry water for about 2 days, which would just mean that a lot of hikers would probably get dehydrated because they wouldn't carry enough. And yes, the third gate water cache is supplied with thousands of gallons of water every year by people, I think, from San Diego. And that's really a hell of an institution that really makes it a lot easier. And I'm totally grateful that people do this and that this water cache exists. So, we've just seen in the video you go down a little path like this, and this water sign here shows you where to go, and then it's all very well organized. You can take 3 liters, no more, and then here in this part you crumble up the canister, so everything is also very well organized with the waste management. And we took our break there because it was somehow convenient and because there was a bit of shade. So under all of these bushes, there were already some hikers lying around and vegetating. And we put up you can see it here, our umbrellas, and just packed ourselves in there. And yes, you can't call it anything else. We just laid there and sweated. So it was really, really hot. It was also totally boring because we just spent hours there. But you just couldn't go any further in heat, and that would have been totally counterproductive in terms of hydration. And even then, we must have sweated out half a liter of the 3 liters we were allowed to take, probably. So, but yes, we moved at some point in the evening, and then it became relatively pleasant again. So, as soon as the sun is a bit lower, when it's at its zenith, it's really brutally hot. But after a few hours, after that, you can hike with pleasant weather. Yes, so we walked with our umbrellas. That was actually a great thing to be able to do, and it really helps a lot when the sun isn't beating down on your head all the time. So it was a great institution to have these trekking umbrellas with us. So I would want to miss it. There are many people who don't take umbrellas, but I would definitely take one with me every time I go there, and also in other desert areas. And then I also saw my first rattlesnake, or rather I heard it first, and that was the one up here. So when I saw it and it was already in this alert position, I first warned the others, and when we had digested the initial shock, it was totally exciting. So we don't have any poisonous snakes in Germany. I mean, we have one, but it's really not dangerous. It can't kill you and anything like that. So of course we knew that there were rattlesnakes and that they were active, and we had actually expected to see one much earlier, but that was our first one, and it was totally cool because they have already, as they have such a notorious reputation because they can potentially kill you with their bite. So I mean, that's super rare and doesn't actually happen to hikers. So I heard it only happens if you accidentally step on them or if you provoke them, and the latter is probably mostly done by drunk young men, as someone told me, as a test of courage. And yeah, then there are probably also bites, but it almost never happens that a PCT hiker is bitten by a snake. And you always have a bit of respect for the situation that there are highly poisonous snakes, and yet we really wanted to see them, because it was just something that we couldn't see at our homeland. And yeah, this snake here, this is the same one that was on the video. I saw it sometime later on the same day, and at first I thought it was dead because it was lying in the middle of the path, but then I think it was just warming up or whatever, and when I approached it, it slowly slithered away. And I think that's just the kind of situation where something is more likely to happen, because they can be mistaken for a stick or something and you step on them. But in any case, a super great animal to see and totally interesting to hear that sound. It was somehow all super exciting, and we really enjoyed seeing these animals. Then we also crossed the 100-mile mark. That was our first major milestone in terms of distance. I mean, we had already reached the 50-mile mark and the 1-mile mark, but the first 100-mile mark, even if it says here, congrats, in quotation marks, only 26 times as much, which is of course still a bit of a joke that you're only at the very beginning of your trip, but it was still great to see that you've now completed 100 miles. For me, it was always like that. That 100-mile markers, I mean, they were there every time, like 200, 300, and so on. And that was always something very special for me, because I could realize then that I was actually making progress. And, for outsiders, it might look like everything we are doing there is so great and that you're living every moment, but you quickly get into a rhythm that makes you fall into a slight lethargy and almost into a trance where you don't really realize what you're actually doing. Especially later, I had this in Washington, but it wasn't always the case that you realized how far you were getting and where you were getting through. And when you saw those markers that you have done another 100 miles, then you realized it again, and that was and you realized that you were really on this journey and that you were going to make it, that you are doing it, that you're making progress. And those markings had a very positive influence on that feeling. And then we're still on the same day. I was kind of alone in the evening, and then I met this guy here, who I don't know his name is or what he looks like from the front, but I know that we pushed each other like crazy. That was totally exciting. We kind of met there by chance, talked a bit, and then we had the same destination. I think it was called Barrel Springs, a spring where you could camp. And then we somehow we motivated each other so much that we walked 8 kilometers in an hour. And of course, that's crazy. That's super fast. And we just ran down the mountains, and I never saw him again after that. But I can remember this evening very well. This last hour of hiking that we hiked together this day. So eventually we arrived at Barrel Springs, and there were already a few other hikers there, including people that I had never seen before, which was weird because usually at camp we always saw the same group of people, but we must have caught up with them somehow. And there was also this turkey walking around camp, which I thought was very nice because I had never seen a turkey in the wild before. And I think it's just a funny animal. Huge body, tiny head, kind of funny. And it didn't mind at all that we were camping there. Another hiker said, "Oh, that's a very social turkey." And I just assumed that the turkey somehow lived there and was used to the fact that there were always people hanging around where he lived, so to speak. What I also remember well about this camp was that there was a guy who was researching ticks, and I found that very exciting. Well, unfortunately, I am a tick magnet. When I walk around a meadow in Sweden, I immediately have 10 ticks on my leg. And of course, because of the potential danger of Lyme disease and stuff like that, I was very interested in what he had to say, this tick researcher. And he had a white flag on his trekking pole and was walking around the grass and bushes looking for ticks. So he was waving with his pole in the grass, and where he wanted to take them with him, I think. But he didn't find any, which I thought was really nice, of course. And he also said that ticks were generally not an issue on the PCT, generally not so much west of the Rocky Mountains. And I actually didn't have a single tick bite on the entire hike and only saw 2 ticks, one at McDonald's and one on the grass. And yes, that was, of course, a very pleasant thing for me as a tick magnet. The next day, we started again very early in the morning because of the heat, and we came to this great open field. So I think you can almost call it a steppe or a prairie or something like that. And that was another of these sites with this incredible expanse, and I thought it was very beautiful. This gigantic open field. You see these 2 little dots here are some 2 hikers, and I think this looks just amazing. And I was very glad that we were there in the morning, because doing that during the midday heat would just be incredibly unpleasant, I guess. But we really enjoyed walking there in the morning. It was just very beautiful. Yeah, a few cows were grazing there too. I found it a bit strange because the grass looks so barren there, and I saw a video a few days ago of a hiker who was walking there a few days ago, and it was all green, so it seems to be normal grass somehow, but it has somehow dried out, I guess, due to the advancing heat or whatever. But the cows still seem to be able to extract some nutrients from it, and because they were grazing quite happily. And yeah, that was kind of nice. I like cows. Interestingly, most Americans I met are totally afraid of cows, which I thought was weird because they are everywhere. But they were not the biggest fans of cows. There was once a really funny situation where a cow was standing in the middle of the path, and a little group had already formed behind it, like a traffic jam, and the cow just didn't want to leave. And somehow we already had the reputation of being some kind of cow whisperers, and when we got there, they said, "Oh, the Germans, let the Germans do it." And then we had to chase the cows out of the way. That was quite funny. Just a little anecdote on the side here. In this video, I'm talking about how we were staying in Barrel Springs and planning on going to Warner Springs for some ice cream, some showers, and some just hanging around. And I'm also talking about that I was twisting my ankle in the beginning of the trail, pretty much, and that I was worried about it. And indeed, it was something that worried me a lot at the beginning, because I didn't know that about myself. I never actually twist my ankle. And that was, of course, a symptom of overuse. And that was something that worried me, because I asked myself the question, is my body even capable of doing this hike? Is my body able to withstand this immense strain of 20 miles, 30 miles every day? And yeah, that was a thing at the beginning where I was like, where I was scared, but then it all settled down, and I think I just got used to it, or that my body got the training it needed or something like that. So it didn't happen that much anymore. But it was definitely a bit of a downer at the beginning. Yeah, but where we actually were heading, walking through this great prairie, was this beautiful rock formation called Eagle Rock. And I was looking forward to seeing that for a long time. I always love stuff like that, where you can see the artistry of nature, you know? I mean, this is a natural rock formation that looks like an eagle spreading its wings, and I do like to see something like that. Of course, it's just us humans who see somehow figures in everything, but, you know, in every cloud, in every tree bark. I'm like that myself, but I think it's actually a nice thing when you recognize figures in nature that are familiar to you, because it somehow gives me the feeling that we are connected to nature and that we are not so different from nature. And that's actually a beautiful thing, I think. And I mean, you really have to say that this is a great site, isn't it? I was lucky when we got there. So when I got there, there were only 2 other people. And so I was able to really enjoy this monument in beautiful silence and beautiful solitude. And later, many other people joined me. And in the end, there were somehow like 20 people. And of course, I took a break, I took my photos, and yeah, it was just a super nice experience, especially because I had been looking forward to seeing it in real life for a long time. I mean, it's a very prominent side of the first weeks on the PCT. And as always, seeing animals was also great. And somehow it was like there were more and more animals, which I found strange because we were moving into supposedly more hostile areas. But you saw more and more lizards, snakes, and I thought that was great. So we went to this desert and even saw more animals than before. And yeah, it was just really nice to see so many animals, even though traveling in a desert. Yeah, so what was also great is our stop in Warner Springs. Warner Springs is a very small village, town, whatever, and the PCT doesn't even go right through there. You just pass this community center. But that's a place where all the hikers stop. And I think it also feels like it's only open to hikers or maybe a few day hikers or something, but it's really completely geared towards the needs of through hikers. And you can buy ice cream there, you can buy Coke there, which we also did 2 or 3 times, I don't know. And you can take a shower there. And I took my first shower of the trip, which might shock some people, but I mean, you're outside after all, it doesn't matter. So I took my first shower there, and I remember it was an outdoor shower behind the house. And I just stood under this beautiful cold water with my clothes on and enjoyed the freshness after sweating for over a week. And I washed my clothes in the shower, I washed myself in the shower, and then I hung my clothes on the fence. And yeah, I took a very nice long break there and had really good lunch, really good conversations. And there were also a few trees, as you can see, very pleasant, and Coke and ice cream. And yeah, it was all in all a very nice experience to be in Warner Springs. And yeah, everyone somehow didn't feel like walking any further in the heat, so it was just a great, relaxed atmosphere there, really pleasant. And yeah, some people picked up their resupply packages from Warner Springs town, and I didn't go there myself because I didn't have a resupply package there, but the sheriff was shuttling people from the community center to the post office, which I found was very nice of him. And the people who went there were transported in the back of the car where usually the criminals sit, which I guess was a funny experience too. And in the evening we went out again. We walked for like 4 or 5 miles or so, and then went straight back into this steppy-like area. Yeah, so we just walked back into the desert, and then at some point we pitched our tent, and after a really nice day we just went to bed and had a good night's sleep. So in this photograph here we see an animal that fascinated me more than any other wildlife. Well, maybe not quite, but I found it super exciting. So, I mean, this is obviously a tarantula, and that's a so-called Tarantula Hawk. And that's really a crazy animal. I've seen it twice, once here in full action and once flying. And the Tarantula Hawk, it's waiting for tarantulas. Like, I don't know if it's flying around or whatever, but it's waiting for tarantulas. And if it finds one, it swoops down on them, stuns them with a sting or bite or whatever, and then pulls them into the tarantula's den or into another cave, at least any cave, while it is still alive. So it's paralyzed, but it's not dead. And then it is laying a single egg on the tarantula. And when the egg hatches, the larva consumes the still living tarantula. And I mean, I think that's absolutely crazy. Unfortunately, I didn't take a video because it was already an incredible sight to see this small insect carrying a somewhat heavy tarantula just casually over the ground into this cave. But yeah, I think this whole procedure of how this insect reproduces and raises their offspring was totally crazy. And I have never heard of it before, and I took a photo of it and showed it to someone else, and he said, yeah, that's a Tarantula Hawk. And then I researched it, and I was totally amazed by this animal. Well, here's another rattlesnake. We soon saw them every day or every other day, and then at some point they weren't so spectacular anymore, but you were still somewhat happy to see them, which is strange, I guess, but it was like that. And yeah, then it just went on like this, and here you can see a few more beautiful moments of such an evening atmosphere. I had already said in the first video that I always enjoyed hiking in the evening because the climate was pleasant, and also this great lightning, this great mood which you had there. If it was really just so nice to walk there in the evening. Yeah, this is another snake I saw. It's a king snake. It's not poisonous, but it's absolutely beautiful, I think. I think it looks so crazy how it moves and how the pattern follows the movement of the snake. And in general, the PCT is an El Dorado for snake lovers. So if you like snakes, then you're in very good place here on the PCT. Yeah, and I was particularly happy to see this snake because I thought it was just so beautiful with the colors and the pattern. Yeah, and this little guy here, I saw him more and more often. He was always doing push-ups, and I don't know if it's a threatening gesture or whatever, or if he's just curious. I think, I mean, in any case, I thought it was pretty cute. Yeah, and then at some point we ended up at Mike's place. And that was a really weird place. It's an area with several buildings, and it belongs to a guy named Mike, a trail angel, but he doesn't live there apparently, so I think it's some kind of his hideout or getaway or whatever. And it's a little bit off trail. You go down a little path there to reach it, and then you get there, and it's just it's just a place which is completely cluttered with junk, with trailers, with musical instruments, electrical equipment, and stuff, just stuff. And it's very strange. And there were all kinds of people there who weren't hikers, but who were also not living there. For example, a guy that had just gotten out of prison and had found God in prison. And then there was this young child with his grandfather or whatever. They were shooting all the time. Well, it was really like a scene from a Western movie or something like that. But the mood was crazy. I really enjoyed being there. It was a totally interesting experience. And Mike was a great guy. And there was Tom from Kennedy Meadows, who is no longer alive, unfortunately. But he handed out ice cream, and Mike was frying potatoes and chicken and pancakes, and it was just awesome. We had a really great time, and it was also very pleasant to spend the midday heat there instead of in the desert. And somehow there were like, I don't know, 30 hikers or so, or even more. So it looked like everybody was gathering there, and it was really nice and very strange at the same time. But I really like to think back to this day spending at Mike's place. Well, yeah, and in the evening we just hiked out like always, and we just hiked for a few more moments while the sun was not so brutally shining anymore. And so we were able to walk in this beautiful full moon night. And I thought that was a great privilege to be able to walk through such a spectacular landscape in such beautiful nights. Really, really beautiful. And this is a typical camp from us. This is our tent, and there's another tent in the back. And in the evening it was usually like that we were all sitting outside of our tents together having dinner, and then at 9 or something like that we were going to bed and sleeping. This is a typical break, and up here there was a spring, and if there is a spring then there's always a bunch of Hikertrash, because there's a spring, there's water, there's trees, and that's just a perfect place for having your lunch break. This is all my stuff, and during the lunch breaks I usually try to find new combinations to put into my tortillas, because this, for me it was very important to give my taste buds a little bit of variety every day, so that I don't get tired of eating, because food is in the end the stuff that fuels you, that stuff that makes you actually hike. And for me it was very important to not get bored of my food. We are not used to this situation from our privileged situation at home with lots of varieties of food available every day, so we were always checking new combinations of food items. Peanut butter, though, was always on the menu, and it's the hiker food of all, and for good reason. I mean, it's high in calories, it's high in nutrients, very rich in protein, many micronutrients, and it's just a very good food item for a time where you, let's be honest, where you basically eat shit and trash, and it's really, I mean, the hiker diet is not the healthiest, but peanut butter is quite good. What I also liked about this break is that Shadow Hawk, this guy here, he had a Native American flute and he was playing it, and I'm a musician myself and I missed making music on the trail, and so I really enjoyed when I met people who were doing music on the trail. Another interesting fact about this man is that he has been a great inspiration for me to start with backpacking, to start with thru-hiking in the first place, because he is part of a very famous documentary movie about the Appalachian Trail that was made by a German television. And I first saw that at the age of 16 or something like that, and I was hooked immediately from I watched this documentary and I saw this lifestyle, and I knew that I wanted to do that. And to meet this guy by coincidence on the trail was, I don't know, it was a crazy gift, I would say, because it was he was somehow a source of my trekking passion, and to see him in person was great. He was a great guy too. He was even able to speak German. I think he was living in Belgium for some time or something like that, and he learned German. And great man, very nice man, and So here we see 3 different animals that I saw in the desert. I mean, we all know this guy now. We have seen him multiple times, and I was very happy every time I saw him because I think he's just so beautiful. And I think this snake is king snake 2, but just with a different coloration. But I'm not sure, and I'm absolutely not sure what this animal is. I have no idea, to be honest. So if you know it, just let me know in the comments what this animal is. It was quite large, like half of my index finger or so. So, pretty fat guy. Well, yeah, and here, me and Water. Water and I, we became best friends. And I was definitely not that aware of Water before the trail. You know, I had only done hikes in Germany, in the Alps, and in Scandinavia, and water isn't really an issue anywhere there. And because, yeah, water is just everywhere. And I am a guy who sweats a lot, and I need a lot of water. There was one day on the trail where I drank 10 liters of water. And yeah, so every time I saw a water cache like this one here, I took half a liter or so just to rehydrate and not touch my my water supplies that I had been carrying, because I was always planning on the limit. So I think everybody who wastes water should hike through the desert at some time to learn the value of water. I learned it definitely. California was in the 5th year of an extreme drought, and although we had the wettest spring of all time there, many water sources that used to exist didn't exist at that year, and they didn't magically reappear just because it was raining a few times. And even in San Diego, we were called not to flush the toilet when we just did number 1, and there was no showering and stuff like that. And this was the first time I really learned how it was when water was scarce, and it was a very formative experience to have lack of water. Before I started the hike, many people in my home country asked me if I wasn't scared to be killed by any animals like snakes or bears. And as I said, that rarely happens, or almost never. But what does happen sometimes is that you get killed by cones. And I really couldn't imagine that until then, because, you know, the cones of the trees in Europe are small. But when I saw these guys, I realized that this danger is very real, and that this is an absolute potential deadly hazard. And you know, I have a gigantic head, and you see that this cone is almost as big as my head. And when this thing falls on you from a tree, from a height of 15 meters, 20 meters, whatever, then it's over. And they, you know, they were really heavy, like a cabbage or something like that. And well, when I saw them, I was definitely gaining some respect for this potential danger. Yeah, so these are a few more desert images, and I was really happy when I saw flowers and you know, some green leaves in the desert, even though I did say before that I enjoyed the absence of plants. But not only your taste buds won't change, also your eyes want it. You know, everything gets quite old if you see it every day. And yep, to have this variety in landscape, I really enjoyed. And I mean, look at this. This is absolutely amazing, isn't it? Such a fascinating view. Yeah, I'm thinking about this quite often. I would love to walk there again. I am planning on coming back to the United States at some point and hike this trail again, or parts of it, or the Arizona Trail, Continental Divide Trail. Those are all on my lists, because this desert landscape is so appealing to me. I feel so drawn to it, probably mainly because I don't know this from Europe. I do remember when we reached this camp that we were all totally exhausted, really very exhausted, which might have been because we hadn't had any 0 day so far, so no day without any hiking. And yeah, that was because we wanted to get to Idyllwild first. We had planned to hike through to Idyllwild and have our first 0 day there. And we made it. Back then there was a section of the trail that was closed due to a fire. I think it was there 2 years ago or something like that, and well, they closed the trail until they clean all the dead branches, the dead trees, so that they don't fall on the hikers. And but because of that, we had to detour around the trail to the road to Idyllwild, and it was a very steep hike downhill on concrete roads, and that was very not pleasant. And we also passed a property where it said that intruders will be shot, which I found was a very American thing. And we were a little bit scared, but we just stayed on the road. And well, when we reached the road to Idyllwild, the crossing, well, what happened was that a red car stopped, and it was Devilfish from episode 1 who was taking us back from Julian to Scissors Crossing. And yeah, it was just a coincidence that he passed us there, and he took us to Idyllwild, which was obviously very, very pleasant for us, because otherwise we would have had to walk to Idyllwild because there was really not much traffic. And in Idyllwild we set up our tents at the local campground, and we had a shower, and then, well, of course we ate. We went to a Mexican restaurant, I can remember, and after that we had milkshakes. And that is really a thing that Americans are really good at, milkshakes. So back then we didn't have those fancy milkshakes in Germany. I mean, probably somewhere, but I had never had such a milkshake. I only knew the ones from McDonald's, and I already liked these, but I had never eaten such an amazing milkshake like this one. And it was absolutely next level, and I enjoyed this very much. I love ice cream, and that was just absolutely awesome, especially after hiking for 170 miles through the desert. That was just a great treat to reward myself for doing it. And yep, in Idyllwild we had our first 0 day and just enjoyed strolling around the town, checking out the hiker boxes, buying some food. I think I even already sent a package to Kennedy Meadows from there with some food. We just had a relaxing day without hiking, and relax our feet a little bit. And I can remember that I had bad blisters already at this time, and I had also chafing at the back of my foot, and so it was very nice to just walk around in flip-flops for a day. Yeah, and this is how episode 2 from Julian to Idyllwild ends, and I hope you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you like it, and if you want to be part of the next videos. And if you have any questions, or if you want to tell your own stories about this this stretch of trail, just leave a comment down below, and I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, we will see each other in episode 3 from Idyllwild to Big Bear Lake. Bye!